If you walked into Marcus' apartment tonight, you would probably miss the most important thing about his life. You would see a worn Honda key hanging by the door. You would see a slow cooker on the counter with something inexpensive and sensible waiting inside it. You would see a television that works perfectly well and therefore has not been replaced. You would see a couch that does its job without trying to become a personality. You would see a refrigerator calendar with a little note written on the first of every year, 401k plus 1%. What you would not see is the force quietly changing his future. You would not see the absence of panic. You would not see the way his life is arranged so that money keeps moving in the right direction before his moods have a chance to interfere. And if you walked into Derek's place, you would notice something else. The espresso machine's still in the box, the one he bought on Black Friday because the deal looked too good to ignore. The Amazon returns by the door. The Robin Hood alerts glowing on his phone, the parking receipt from downtown because the convenient lot felt worth it in the moment. The expensive car outside, the one whose payment has become so normal that he only flinches when he is unusually tired. Marcus and Derek live in the same city. They have similar job titles. Their pay is close enough that income does not explain what I am about to tell you. Marcus has about $340,000 invested at 36. Derek has about $11,000, a large car payment, and the sort of financial stress that never announces itself loudly enough to seem like a crisis but never goes quiet enough to feel like peace. This is not a story about genius. It is not a story about luck. It is not a story about finding the next great stock before everybody else. It is not a story about secret opportunities, hidden tax tricks, exotic assets, or some clever system that only hedge funds understand. It is a story about 10 habits so ordinary that most people keep walking right past them while waiting for the thing that really moves the needle. I have spent most of my life around money, and one of the strangest things I have observed is this. People are almost always looking for the dramatic explanation when a boring one would do. Why did one person become strong while another stayed anxious? Why did one life widen while the other one tightened? Why does one household absorb surprise expenses with irritation while another absorbs them with panic? The public likes to blame income first. Income matters. But income explains less than people think. What matters just as much is the system through which money flows once it enters a life. Most people imagine wealth arrives because somebody found the right thing, the right investment, the right business, the right property, the right moment. I think that belief costs people decades. The problem is not usually that they fail to discover the extraordinary. The problem is that they keep ignoring the ordinary machinery that turns income into options. That machinery is not photogenic. It does not create a laws. It does not produce a social media personality. It does not make a man feel glamorous at dinner. It does something much better. It quietly gives him room. And room is one of the most underappreciated forms of wealth in the world. Room to absorb a bad month. Room to say no to work you hate. Room to let a good investment keep compounding instead of selling it because life cornered you. Room to get older without every new expense sounding like an accusation. That is what these habits are building. Not merely a number on a statement. They are building options, and options are what make money useful. The first habit is to automate savings before your brain gets involved. This sounds small, but I think it may be one of the greatest advantages an ordinary person can create for himself. People talk as if saving money is a moral issue. They say you need discipline. They say you need to want the future badly enough. They say you need more self-control. I do not think that is the right starting point. I think the right starting point is to stop asking the human brain to win a fight it keeps losing. The brain loves the present. It loves food now, comfort now, convenience now, status now, relief. Now, the future is abstract. The future does not taste like anything. It does not flatter you this afternoon. So if every month you make saving into a fresh decision, you are setting up a contest between something vivid and something invisible. The vivid thing usually wins. That is why I prefer default over heroism. If the money leaves your paycheck before your lifestyle gets a vote, the whole psychology changes. The sacrifice never becomes dramatic because the argument never gets to begin. By the time your conscious mind starts allocating, the future has already been paid. That is one reason automatic enrollment and automatic increases are so powerful. They remove the need to constantly prove character. I would much rather build a system that assumes I will be human than a system that requires me to be magnificent every payday. Marcus understood this. He did not keep asking whether he felt like saving. He increased the amount when raises came and then let the habit disappear into the background of life. Derek keeps telling himself he will save more when things calm down. Life rarely calms down. That is one reason later is one of the most expensive words in finance. The second habit is to drive something paid off and slightly embarrassing. I have never met a person who became poor because his car was too humble. I have met a great many who remained weak because their vehicles were too expensive. The car payment is one of the most socially defended wealth destroyers in America. People will blame groceries, coffee, inflation, politicians, the economy, and their parents before they admit that the second nicest thing in their driveway is quietly eating their future. The dealership understands psychology very well. It does not sell total cost. It sells monthly tolerability. It says, here is the number you can survive. It does not say, here is the machine that will depreciate while you keep paying for the privilege of pretending you are a level of wealthy you have not yet reached. A large car payment is not transportation. It is usually identity financed at a punitive rate. And when people replace one financed identity with another every few years, the payment becomes functionally permanent. That is the real poison, not one contract. A lifestyle in which contracts keep arriving before the old one was ever allowed to liberate you. Marcus drives something that does not photograph well. That is one reason his future photographs beautifully. Derek drives something that flatters him in parking lots and weakens him everywhere else. The money difference between those two decisions, repeated for years, is enormous. But the deeper difference is psychological. The man without the payment feels lighter. The man with it normalizes pressure. Pressure then begins shaping every other choice. A person under fixed monthly strain cannot behave as freely as a person without it. That matters more than style. The third habit is to cook food at home like retirement depends on it. Because in a strange way it does. The public dismisses food spending because each individual decision feels too small to qualify as a life choice. It is just dinner. It is just lunch. It is just delivery because the day was long. That language is precisely how wealth gets drained without ceremony. Food away from home is one of the easiest places for convenience to masquerade as harmless routine. A few restaurant meals, a little delivery, a lunch habit near the office. The person never wakes up and decides, I will now donate $600,000 of future capital to avoid using a kitchen. And yet that can be close to the actual long-term trade. Marcus uses a slow cooker because he respects repetition. Derek keeps paying for the mood of the moment. The difference is not culinary virtue. The difference is that one man has made food boring enough that it leaves room for his future, and the other has made convenience so routine that it functions like a private tax on every month of his life. People underestimate repeated middling expenses because each one is too small to trigger seriousness. That is exactly why they are powerful. They slip through the emotional defenses. A person will think hard before buying a sports car. He will not think nearly as hard about $22 here and $38 there and $18 on one tired evening when he does not want to think. The problem is not one tired evening. The problem is 250 tired evenings over 10 years. Those numbers compound into a different retirement. The fourth habit is to buy less house than the bank will let you buy. This may be the most important habit on the whole list because housing is where people commit the largest financial errors while believing they are behaving like adults. The bank is not trying to tell you what will make your life strong. The bank is trying to tell you the maximum burden it believes you can carry without immediately collapsing. Those are very different standards. A family that buys the top of what the bank says is possible often ends up living inside a house that has quietly purchased too much of their future. The extra bedrooms, larger kitchen, prettier street, and more flattering address all feel reasonable at the time. The monthly payment is survivable. That is the trap. Survivable is not the right standard. Sustainable with margin is the right standard. A house should fit the whole life, not only the peak earning moment. If a family buys a house that leaves no room for repairs, job shifts, childcare changes, health surprises, tax increases, or simply breathing space, then the house is not really a symbol of success. It is a beautiful device for transferring future freedom into current square footage. Marcus bought less house than he was told he could manage. That is one reason he can manage life. Derek bought close to the line. Everything after that became tighter, not because he was reckless in the cartoon sense, but because he confused a respectable ceiling with a wise one. That happens constantly. People become poor by inches wearing very nice smiles. The fifth habit is to track every dollar, like it has somewhere better to be. Now, I need to say this carefully because I do not believe in turning ordinary people into unpaid accountants of their own misery. I do not think a life improves because a person color codes every coffee and updates a spreadsheet every night until he begins hating both money and himself. That is not what I mean. I mean awareness, not obsession. A great many households are losing, not because they spend wildly, but because they spend blindly. Money disappears into subscriptions, convenience fees, little penalties, default renewals, soft habits, and categories so muddy that nobody can explain where the leak really is. Then the month ends, the account is smaller than it should be, and everyone looks at one another as though some invisible thief came in through the vents. The thief was the absence of attention. I have always believed that a person should know his big numbers cold. What are my fixed costs? What am I actually saving? What is my investing rate? What recurring charges produce almost no joy? What seemingly small conveniences are adding up into large annual stupidity? That knowledge is power. Not power in the cinematic sense. Power in the calm adult sense. Once you know where the money is really going, you stop making little moral speeches about discipline and begin making structural changes. Marcus knows his numbers. Derek knows his feelings about his numbers. That is not the same thing. The sixth habit is to invest every raise before your lifestyle knows about it. This one may be the cleanest wealth builder on the list because it turns a period of visible progress into a hidden transfer of power. Most people get a raise and immediately start spending like the raise had a public relations department, a little better apartment, a more convenient parking arrangement, daily lunch instead of packed food, a nicer version of some old routine. Within a few months, the money has disappeared into a new baseline. That is the magic trick of lifestyle inflation. It does not usually feel like extravagance. It feels like normal after 3 months. That is why it is so lethal. The person is not trying to become financially weaker. He is only letting his standard of living sprint to meet every increase in his earning power. Over time, this turns career success into a very polished treadmill. The person earns more, spends more, and still feels strangely unchanged. Marcus solves this problem with a quiet act of treachery against his own future weakness. When a raise comes, he reroutes part of it into savings and investing before his lifestyle can build an emotional claim to the money. He never learns to miss what he never quite got used to spending. That is a beautiful thing. Derek keeps absorbing the raise into the surface of life. His future never receives the full force of his present success. That is a tragedy repeated in millions of households. The seventh habit is to buy broad index funds and then do almost nothing. This offends people because it is too simple. The public likes drama, it likes stock tips, it likes traders with screens, it likes the feeling that somewhere there is a hidden technique separating the informed from the ordinary. I have made a life out of analyzing individual businesses, and even I will tell you that for most people, the broad low-cost index fund is one of the best answers ever invented. Why? Because it allows an ordinary person to own the productive engine without becoming an accidental speculator. You do not have to identify the one company that will dominate 10 years from now. You do not have to trust your brother-in-law's conviction. You do not need to listen to every macro discussion and pretend you know more than you do. You own the field. The strong firms rise, the weak ones fade. You let capitalism do part of the sorting for you. That is one of the most humane and democratic structures in finance. The public finds it boring. Good boring has created a lot more wealth than excitement ever will. The average investor underperforms the market, not because the market is cruel, but because he keeps trying to be more interesting than he needs to be. He jumps in and out, he predicts, he reacts, he grows impatient, he buys stories. A broad index fund asks very little of him by comparison. Fund it, hold it, keep going. Let time do the embarrassing work of proving that his clever detours were unnecessary. The eighth habit is to build an emergency fund like something will go wrong, because something will. The public keeps treating emergency funds as optional, because emergency funds are boring and unphotogenic. Nobody posts his high-yield savings account with pride. Nobody receives applause for having 6 months of expenses tucked away. And yet that pile of boring money is one of the few things standing between an inconvenient life event and a financial spiral. An emergency fund does not exist to make you rich. It exists to keep one bad month from eating the machine that was going to make you rich. That is an entirely different job, and it is one of the highest return jobs money can do. The family without liquidity is forced into terrible bargains, credit cards, at absurd rates, panic sales of investments, bad loans, desperation choices. Those things do not merely cost money once. They create setbacks that can take years to reverse. Marcus has a reserve, so when the car needs work, it is irritating. When Derek has the same surprise, it becomes a small emergency with interest attached. That is the difference between inconvenience and crisis. The ninth habit is to ignore exciting financial opportunities that find you. I have never trusted the thing that arrives with too much enthusiasm and too little arithmetic. If someone is excited to bring me an opportunity, I immediately ask why the opportunity needs this much theater. Great wealth building does not usually market itself with fireworks. It sits there patiently, almost embarrassed by its own simplicity. The things that chase ordinary people the hardest are very often the things most likely to disappoint them. Crypto tips, friend of a friend real estate deals, hot stocks, miracle side businesses, coaching funnels, disguised as freedom. The structure is always similar. The upside is vivid. The downside is blurred or omitted. The winner is visible. The 99 failures are silent. This distorts the public's sense of reality. It begins overweighting dramatic possibilities simply because dramatic possibilities are easier to imagine than steady compounding. Marcus ignores what is exciting. That sounds unimpressive. It is one of the most impressive things about him. Derek keeps looking for the thing. He still believes the gap between him and wealth might be solved by discovery instead of structure. That belief is costing him years. The 10th habit is to sleep on major purchases for 72 hours. This may sound too small to matter. It is not. Impulse spending is one of the most efficient systems in the world for converting emotion to lasting clutter. The mind experiences urgency. The body experiences the little thrill of acquisition. The purchase arrives. Then the emotion drains out of the object while the money remains permanently gone. The reason a waiting period works is not that it makes you wiser in some abstract spiritual sense. It introduces friction. And most foolish purchases cannot survive friction. That is a useful fact. You are not saying no. You are saying Friday. And by Friday, the object so often reveals itself to have been a passing feeling, wearing the clothes of necessity. The public wants self-control to be a giant moral trait. I prefer simple devices. A calendar reminder can do a lot of the work that pride cannot. That is the whole list. 10 habits, none of them glamorous. None of them especially likely to impress the neighbor. None of them likely to become a best-selling secret sold at a hotel conference. And yet here we are, Marcus at 36 with a real pile of capital. Not because he discovered genius, but because he let boring run long enough to become extraordinary. Derek at 36 with decent income, decent intentions, and a life optimized for how things feel in the moment, instead of what they become over time. I want to be careful here. Derek is not a villain. He is not stupid. He is not even unusually reckless. That is the point. He is ordinary, and ordinary, left unexamined, is expensive. The difference between the two men did not come from one big fork in the road. It came from 1,000 small trades, convenience versus future ownership, identity versus margin, excitement versus structure. Now, versus later, that is the true arithmetic of wealth. Most people keep searching for a breakthrough because a breakthrough sounds cinematic. I would rather have continuity. Continuity can survive bad moods. Continuity can survive bad headlines. Continuity can survive the ordinary ugliness of life. A person with good continuity eventually looks lucky to people who never saw the systems. That is why I say the habits are not the point. The point is what they protect margin. Margin is the gap between what you earn and what you need. Margin is what turns a layoff into a setback instead of a collapse. Margin is what lets you say no to a humiliating job offer. Margin is what lets you keep investing while prices are low instead of selling because you are frightened. Margin is what lets the future arrive without sounding like a threat. People think wealth is mostly about the number. The number matters, of course, but the number is only useful because of the options it protects. When something goes wrong for Marcus, the problem is annoying. When something goes wrong for Derek, the problem becomes existential. That is not really about dollars. It is about room. The whole purpose of these unsexy habits is to buy room before you need it. That is what a sane financial life is supposed to do. Not create the image of success. Create the ability to absorb reality. The public keeps looking for excitement. I keep coming back to something simpler. Let boring run. Let automatic transfers run. Let the paid-off car keep running. Let the slow cooker keep running. Let the index fund keep running. Let the emergency reserve sit there like an insult to every bank that wanted you desperate. Let the 72-hour rule quietly cancel the stupid purchases before they can become permanent. This is not deprivation. It is design. And design compounds. That is one of the deepest truths I know. A good life does not usually emerge from a series of heroic emotional choices. It emerges from a structure that keeps making decent decisions almost boringly inevitable. If I wanted one lesson from all of this remembered, it would be this. Do not wait for the exciting version of wealth building. It does not come. This is the version a little more automatic, a little less impressive, a little more margin, a little less identity spending, a little more ownership, a little less noise. Do that long enough. And the numbers eventually become so large that people assume something extraordinary must have happened. Often nothing extraordinary happened. Someone just kept refusing to trade away the future for things that wanted to be bought today. That is enough. It has always been enough. And for the person who can finally make peace with how unglamorous that truth is, it is more than enough to change an entire life.